We welcome you to Sports Talk. I'm Ted Emrich. It is the last Sports Talk before spring break. Now, baseball is not a sport that takes any break in McKinney ISD, and especially this time of year. All three schools in MISD open district play this week. McKinney's Anthony Hermelin looks to build on his all-state junior season. McKinney Boyd hopes to follow up the best season in school history with an even better one. Meanwhile, North suffered a down 2011 season, but things are already looking up for the Bulldogs in 2012. Coming up, we will sit down with the coaches to look at what's ahead. Also on the way, the Dennis Baker State Farm Scholar Athlete of the Week. This is Sports Talk. McKinney has another rebuilding job to do, but that's nothing new for the Lions. That's what they accomplished in 2011 and made the playoffs for a fifth consecutive season. Coach Jeremy Price joining us now. And Jeremy, yeah, it is kind of similar to last year in that you lose some key players from a good team the year before. On the surface, it wouldn't look like it would be as drastic a change as it was going into last season, losing two first-round Major League Draft picks in Zach Lee and Matt Lipka. But once again, you're very young.
Very young, and you're correct. On the surface, it may not appear to be as drastic, but in reality, we're only returning two full-time starters. And so the challenge is there, and our kids know that, and so, we're going to see if we can meet that challenge.
You've been through a couple of tournaments already, the McKinney ISD tournament, the Sherman Invitational. What have you seen overall from this group?
I've seen growth. That was our goal going in, is that we grew as players both physically and mentally. We've preached since day one that we've got to be mentally better than the team that we're facing on that day. And so from that standpoint, I've seen a lot of growth, and it's exciting, and we hope that continues moving into district play.
It was a tough way to open the season in the McKinney ISD tournament, losses to Allen and Plano West and Rowlett, but you closed that event with a win over McKinney Boyd, a good non-district win over a team that went to the 5A regional quarterfinals a year ago.
Yeah, that was good for the kids to see that if we play quality baseball, that we can play with anybody. Those other games, we played a fairly good game against Allen to start the tournament, but then we had some really costly mistakes against Rowlett and Plano West that ended in the result of some fairly bad losses. But then we regrouped, talked about those mistakes, and were able to come back on Saturday and demonstrate what kind of baseball we're capable of playing.
And then you came back to the Sherman Invitational this past weekend, opened with a 23-0 win over Richardson, then a pair of close losses to the Homeschool Athletic Association as well as the host Sherman. Take us through that event there in Sherman.
It was much the same scenario as the McKinney tournament. We pitched really well Thursday against Richardson. It was one of those games where the bats got hot. The hitting became contagious, and we capitalized on some mistakes by Richardson, but for the most part we played a really good baseball game when we were consistent in the mental aspect and the physical aspect of the game. The two games following that, the Homeschool Athletic Association, they fielded a really strong team. Basically an all-star team of the Metroplex of homeschool young men, and they were a quality baseball team. For the most part, we played well against them, other than the fact that we didn't throw enough strikes. We walked too many hitters and gave them too many opportunities, and they capitalized. The Sherman game Saturday, again, Sherman's a quality program, and we went out and just didn't find a way to get the win in the end, but we played fairly well Saturday.
You say you returned 2 starters, one of them your third baseman, Anthony Hermelin, coming off an outstanding junior season, named first team All-State, the district offensive MVP after hitting .536 with 13 home runs and 57 RBIs. What do you expect from Anthony here in his senior season?
The numbers will probably go down because everybody knows who Anthony is, and with the new bats, those offensive numbers are more than likely going to drop. However, what Anthony brings is leadership. He's been doing it, honestly, since he was a freshman. When he stepped in as a freshman, I knew he had a unique ability to be a leader on the field, in the clubhouse, and so that's what I expect from Anthony, and he delivers consistently.
Jeremy, you mentioned the new bats, the UIL adopting the same standard as what was introduced to the NCAA just last year, smaller sweet spot, the less pop in that aluminum bat. What do you think the effect will be overall as this season moves forward?
I think the effect will be lower scoring ball games. Again, the average hitter, I think you will see a drop in batting averages. I think you'll see a drop in run production. From a pitching standpoint, you've got to love it. You're not going to give up that cheap home run. You're not going to give up, what may have been a double last year is now a single. And so from a pitching standpoint, we're encouraging our guys to throw strikes, and our philosophy has always been to pitch well and play defense, and it's even more so now. But through 2 tournaments, I've seen 2 balls hit out of the park. One in the McKinney tournament and then one this weekend in Sherman, which is completely contradictory to what it's been in the past, especially in Sherman where the wind blows out, and we've had guys hit 4 and 5 in the tournament up there in years past.
Speaking of your pitching staff, I remember last year the philosophy was, more than anything, Johnny all-staff, no aces, everybody contributes. Hobie Harris emerged as your number 1, became a first-team all-district pick. Jesse Cox was in the mix as well. As Harris was lost to graduation, Cox is back, and you'll certainly be relying on him as well as several others.
Yeah, we went into the tournament with a preset lineup as far as our pitching went. Again, we treated it much like spring training. We said a certain guy was going to throw this many innings in one game, and it was predetermined. Regardless of what the game situation was, what the score was, they knew when they were going to go in. And throughout that, we've seen some things that we needed to see. We've got some names that are starting to emerge. Brad Vassar is a sophomore that we saw some things out of him last year as a freshman, and so he's doing a really good job for us. You mentioned Jesse. Jesse does have some varsity experience coming back, and he's going to be in the mix. And then we have several other guys. Marshall Agan's a football player that's given us some time so far on the mound. We have a couple of other seniors, and Tyler Sudduth and John Rep. We've got several guys that we're going to be looking at. We got district game coming up Wednesday. We're going to go with what we feel is our best lineup on Wednesday, but then we get another tournament coming up next weekend where we get another look at those pitchers.
It's got to be quite a sight. Big Angus on the mound, the offensive guard.
It is. It's interesting, and I think he surprises a lot of people with his agility, that he can move and field his position, and he did a really good job. He actually pitched the game against McKinney Boyd out here last Saturday, and then he pitched well again this weekend against Sherman.
One guy that you counted on as a freshman, you're glad to have him back here as a sophomore, Joe Baker, second team all-district as a freshman, playing both middle infield spots for you. What do you think Joe can do for you as a 10th grader?
Hopefully Joe can take what he did last year and build on it. He's got some really good physical skills. We're still working on the mental game with Joe and his focus. And so he does have some unique abilities as a sophomore. And, again, if we can simply get him to build on what he did last year and continue to improve, then he should have a good year for us.
Jeremy, like you said, another tournament coming up this weekend, but first, the district opener against Wiley on Wednesday. How ready is this team for 10-4A competition?
I think we're ready. Obviously we would love to have another week, but we don't. And so, again, we got to take the information that we've gathered through the first 2 weekends and those tournaments and look at what lineup we think gives us the best chance to win, and go out there and just play consistent quality baseball. And if we do that, we've proven that it's effective, and we can win.
Highland Park and Rockwall Heath seem to be the class of this district coming into the season. They were at the top of the standings last year. How do you size up this district overall?
It's no different than it was last year. You know, again, in the Metroplex, honestly, in the state, 10-4A, you know, as good a baseball as you'll see anywhere around, regardless of whether it's Highland Park, Rockwall Heath, Rockwall High, Pierce, us, McKinney North. You know, any of those guys, you know, can beat you anytime you step on the field. And, you know, I don't think there were many surprises in the district last year. I don't anticipate many surprises this year. You know, I think those guys that are the powerhouses, that they've identified themselves and they've earned that reputation. And so, you know, for those of us that may be ranked a little bit lower or seen as a little bit lower, you know, we got to step up to the challenge.
You certainly did that last year in taking one of those last playoff spots right after HP and Rockwall Heath. As for realignment for next year, so much discussion about how it affects football. Well, it affects every sport at McKinney High.
Absolutely. And
you move to 5A starting next year. How does that affect baseball?
The game of baseball, you know, we don't have to have the numbers as far as, you know, football numbers and depth becomes really important. Baseball, again, in the Metroplex, the talent is abundant. And so, you know, you have to take, and that's the beauty of high school sports in general, is you play with the cards that you're dealt, and you try to mold those young men and get them to buy into your philosophy and what you want them to do. And if we can do that, again, you know, those programs, the Allens, the Planos, you know, they're quality programs, but in comparison, you know, I'm not sure it's a whole lot different than Highland Park, Rockwall Heath, you know, Rockwall High. From a talent standpoint, I don't see a whole lot of difference.
Jeremy, that's next year. Good luck the rest of this year.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Jeremy Price, head coach of the McKinney Lions. Yeah, 5A next year, but for now, the McKinney Lions are in Class 4A. And District 10 4A play begins Wednesday against the Wiley Pirates.